Over the past 5 years, the UK has seen 4 different prime ministers, and with the general election just weeks away, it could see a 5th leader take office. 3 of those prime ministers were in office in the space of just 2 months. So why has there been so many? British politics has witnessed many chaotic moments in recent years that can be traced to the historic Brexit vote in 2016, which prompted Prime Minister David Cameron to resign after he had supported remaining in the European Union.
And it's now 8 years since the Brexit referendum, and some of us are still struggling to get over this monumental shift in Britain's place in the world. It's really been an issue that has divided, first and foremost, the Conservative Party. The whole last decade and a bit in British politics has been the psychodrama of Conservative Party politics playing out in a very unforgiving media glare and under public scrutiny.
Cameron's successor, Theresa May, struggled to provide a clear path by which the UK could exit from the EU, and lost the support of Parliament for her Brexit bill, eventually resulting in her resignation in 2019.
I think Theresa May's legacy has been very limited, to be honest. She will be remembered first and foremost as a Prime Minister who tried to get Brexit done, initially in a relatively moderate way, but then being dragged to a harder Brexit by the group of Conservative MPs, and of course she failed.
Theresa May was succeeded by Boris Johnson, whose controversial premiership coincided with the COVID pandemic and the 3 national lockdowns that proved contentious among the public.
Boris Johnson's premiership will stand out in probably the history books for all the wrong reasons. I mean, it was like a hurricane blowing through British politics. Johnson has his fans. He also has his very, very harsh critics. He also took an was politically violent approach to managing his party. He expelled large numbers of Conservatives who dared to defy him in the House of Commons. He then gets embroiled in all sorts of palace intrigues with his advisor, Dominic Cummings. There's also allegations about his girlfriend and wife, Carrie Johnson. And then COVID hits. Then in the press, reports start emerging of parties in Downing Street. And Johnson initially denies any knowledge of them, then concedes they happened, but not perhaps in the way that people are interpreting, and basically gets himself embroiled in all sorts of half-truths, mistruths, and essentially misinformation to Parliament. And his whole premiership ends up just crumbling because of, frankly, the enormous whiff of impropriety surrounding him.
Partygate was one of Johnson's most notorious scandals as Prime Minister, prompting resignations from ethics and anti-corruption ministers, who criticised him as having broken the ministerial code. Johnson was eventually forced to resign after he admitted to appointing an MP as the party's deputy chief whip, despite being aware of sexual assault claims made against him.
His own party then turned on him because of the fact that he was the story, and his manifest lack of integrity and, frankly, moral fitness for the job caught up with him.
He was succeeded by his Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, in 2022. But she remained as Prime Minister for just 45 days, becoming the UK's shortest-serving Premier. She was even outlasted by a wilting lettuce that was live-streamed by popular British tabloid The Daily Star, which had been betting on which of the 2 would last longer. Truss lost trust among her party quickly after revealing a mini-budget that shook markets and devalued the British pound on announcement. Finally, following a Conservative Party vote, current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak entered office, pledging to fix the country's economic policy and deliver on the controversial parliamentary decision to deport irregular migrants for Rwanda. But many see Sunak as having failed to deliver on his plan to ease the cost of living crisis that has resulted in the greatest rise in absolute poverty in 30 years.
I think Rishi Sunak will be remembered as essentially a fag-end Prime Minister, someone at the end of an extended period of single party or party government, and he's really just going to be the sort of punctuation mark. A lot of the things that he inherited, so the cost of living crisis, for example, the economic situation, obviously, that was beyond his control. But he has done many things that suggest his political instincts aren't all that good. And perhaps the best example of this is really the campaign and calling a general election early. He gambled on going to the country in July 2024. He could have waited a few more months, but the campaign itself has been atrocious. So from the very beginning, when Rishi Sunak went out into Downing Street to announce that he was calling an early general election, and it rained, and he got soaked. And he then went to visit Belfast, where he went to the Titanic quarters. And again, not really a good metaphor as a Prime Minister to be going to a place that's most famous for a ship that's sunk.
In the face of a general election in July, most experts predict a Labour victory, which would see Keir Starmer become the next Prime Minister. But he has been dogged by criticism over his stance on the Israeli onslaught on Gaza, after failing to call for a ceasefire in a UK Parliament vote last year. The numerous former Prime Ministers have also been putting increased pressure on public finances. For the first time in history, the UK has 7 living former Prime Ministers, all of whom continue to receive extensive and expensive security protection. The 3 most recently departed Prime Ministers have been specifically criticised for making millions from the lucrative international speaking circuit, while the UK taxpayer covers the security bill. But that's not the only change facing British politics today.
I suppose one more thing worth emphasising, because this is going to matter for the next Prime Minister, it's likely to be Keir Starmer, I think, and that is, under the surface of British politics, the traditional model of two-party government, or alternating government between Conservatives and Labour. Well, party politics beneath the surface is so much more complicated than it was 30, 40 years ago. There are many more parties now sort of nibbling at the heels of both Labour, in the case of the Greens, and then the SNP implied in Scotland and Wales. On the Conservative Party, there is much more of an appetite for just a hard right political party. But I think the stability that we were perhaps used to, even in the late 1990s, early 2000s, is probably going to be a thing of the past.